First off, for those of you that haven't joined us before, my name is Julia. I'm the education coordinator for Big Sky Film Institute, the umbrella organization for the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. The film festival is a 10-day event that screens 150 films plus over 10 days, as I just said, and invites over many attending filmmakers of those films. And with those filmmakers, we get to bring them into classrooms like yourself across the state of Montana through this very special webcam technology. So thanks so much for joining us here today. This afternoon, we'll be screening a section of the film Big Fur. Big Fur is a feature-length film that's over an hour, so we're not able to screen all of it, but if your teacher's got a link the past few weeks, perhaps some of you were able to screen the entire film. We certainly hope so, but if you weren't able to watch it, that's perfectly okay. We'll have enough information with this first 15 to 20 minute chunk of film to answer your questions about our special guest. So without taking up too much time, before I introduce Dan and his guest, I want to say a few things about interacting and using this kind of new technology for some of you guys. So we can see you as well as you can see us. So please be mindful on camera and respectful. It's as if we're standing in your classroom with you. So please keep that in mind as you're asking questions and behaving in class. We're excited to be here, and Dan has traveled very far to join us. So just keep that in mind as you're sitting in front of the camera. As you prepare questions, we open it up to any and all inquiries. So there's no such thing as a silly question, and we want you guys to ask and have the chance to interact with Dan and his special guest, who will not be answering questions. So joining us today from across the state, we have Jody O's class from Drummond, Barry's class with Moore, John's class from Victor, Nehart, is it Nehart?
It's Nehart.
Nyhart's class from Spring Creek, Patty Bartlett's class in Sealy Lake, and then we have also visiting with us Ronan High School and Laurel's class with Sealy, what is that?
Sealy Daniel.
Sealy Daniel. So we have a lot of people joining us. Some of you have webcams that operate and work. Some of you don't. We'll be answering all and every question, or not every question, as many questions as we can in the hour that we have here today. I have Kathleen off camera, kind of punting questions to me and Dan so that we can get to as many as we can. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Dan Wayne, director of the film Big Fur, which we'll be watching a short clip of. And Dan and Allie, would you mind introducing your special guest?
Hello, I'm Dan Wayne. I'm the director of Big Fur. And Big Fur, the star of Big Fur is Patty. And if you've seen the film, you know that already, but hopefully you'll get to see enough to see that the film follows taxidermist Ken Walker as he researches and builds the Bigfoot based on frames from the famous Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And with that introduction, we are going to, do we have the clip loaded? We are going to watch the first 15 to 20 minutes. So as you're watching, I want you guys to kind of pay attention to who's being interviewed and details about the subjects as much as the subject of this fur, this big fur,
this
film,
this furry film.
And Dan and I will be here to answer your questions after the show. So sorry. So teachers, you have the link to this entire feature film. So if you haven't seen it already, we encourage you guys to watch it there. But that's a little teaser for us that'll get us started in today's discussion. So thanks so much for joining us today, Dan.
It's my pleasure.
I know that we have a lot of schools from across the state, as I showed you on the map. You know, we've got all the way in Drummond and Moore and Spring Creek. So thanks everybody for joining us here today. What I'll do is I'll moderate and I'll start with a question, and then we want to hear from you guys and what your questions are with the film. Just based on what we've seen so far, or if you've seen the whole film, whichever questions come first. I guess I'll start with a basic question of how you found Ken Walker and first got involved with the film.
Well, I always had this interest in taxidermy. I'm really
kind of obsessed with things that combine art and science. And taxidermy is a kind of a good example of that. And a lot of people don't really understand what goes into making good taxidermy. So I got some books from the library and I started studying it. And then I found this forum on the internet that had all the best taxidermists in the world were on there. And they were giving tips to each other and helping beginners like me. But pretty quick, I became more interested in the weird people that were practicing it. And there were all these really great, really eccentric characters out there. And I started to think that there would be a good documentary there. And so, you know, I was following several people, and I knew about Ken because, you know, he's famous in the taxidermy world, not only for being the best taxidermist in the world, but also he does these recreations, you know, the Irish elk and the giant panda. And these things are, you know, all taxidermists will specialize in mammals or birds or fish, but, you know, Ken does these recreations. And they make, you know, it's a big deal when he does one. And I knew he had a thing about Bigfoot, but I didn't know how obsessed he was. And, you know, I told him that I was wanting to make a movie about taxidermy. He was very excited, wanted to be involved, and then he told me he was going to make a Bigfoot, and I thought, well, there's the movie right there.
No kidding. The impetus for this like wonderful film. Well, the classes, so we'll open it up to open questions for students we see, and then anybody in the live chat, Kathleen's going to relay to me your questions. So we won't miss anybody. Let's start off with Joanne Barry's class. Are there any questions for your students in there?
Unmute them.
Come up to the front and make sure you speak loud and clear in the microphone if you can.
Okay, go ahead. Evan has a question.
How long did it take you to film the whole movie, and how long, what was the film's budget? Like,
Whoa.
Wow. That's the first time I've got the budget question, but I'm not surprised that, I'm surprised other people haven't asked. So, I started it in 2013, and I got most of it shot in about 3 or 4 years. And then it took me a long time to finish it. The post-production took forever. My editor quit, and then I fired him. And I had to find a new editor, and the animation stuff took a long time. There's more animation throughout the film, kind of sprinkled in. So, you know, it took 7 years before I actually screened it since I started it. But I wasn't working on it full time. You know, it was a little bit here and there. The budget, I got the whole thing shot for probably about $60,000 or $70,000, and then I probably spent, I haven't added it all up, but probably about that same amount in post-production costs for editing, animation, sound mix, color correction. There's a ton of extra things that go into post-production that I didn't know much about. So it was my first film, and I had to kind of learn on the job. So I'd say altogether a little under $200,000.
Wow. And just a side question there, that's a huge chunk of money that's sometimes hard for us to wrap our heads around. Do you apply for grants, or is there like assistance there that...
I applied for grants and didn't get any. Because I spread it out over so much time, I was able to finance almost all of it myself. And then I did a Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding campaign that brought in some money. That was a big distraction because it takes a lot of work to run one of those. But it was successful, so that helped a little bit too.
Yeah, big question, great question.
Let's go to Drummond.
Hi, this is Jody. I don't have any questions put forth to you, but it was very interesting. And I unfortunately didn't have any students come to the library this afternoon to view it. So I'm hoping to find a way to show it at another time when I can.
Yeah, we'll send the recording to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can watch it later and let us know what you think.
Yeah. Victor is asking a bunch of questions. I have some from, and they're in a big room, so they're typing in questions. What's your favorite thing to do, and what inspired you to make this specific film?
Personal questions.
Well, my favorite thing to do on the film, or just in
general?
General? Well, I'm kind of an outdoorsman, you know. I think that's one reason I like taxidermy. And so, you know, I like to camp and And that was really kind of a fun part of making the movie. I went up to Canada quite a bit and spent some time. If you watch the whole film, you'll see some of it takes place in this area that's had a lot of Bigfoot sightings. And I camped out there for a couple weeks and got to know some First Nations tribes that were living there, and got to hear, how their history with Sasquatch, and just kind of, get the lay of the land. It was a really interesting area. So I really I hope you guys can watch the whole film if you haven't already, because you kind of see, the point, a lot of the point of the film is that, Bigfoot in a lot of ways stands for the wilderness, because Bigfoot can't exist without the wilderness. And when you're up there, in Canada, up in northern Alberta, it's a really vast, huge area. And it's not that far-fetched to imagine that there could be Bigfoot living up there.
We're getting several of the students asking how long it took to build the Sasquatch.
It was done over 2 years, but Ken is a commercial taxidermist, so he has other client work he has to do too. So sometimes I would plan to go up there, and he'd be, okay, we're gonna carve the arms and legs, while I'm up there, and I would get there and he'd say, well, I can't work on it now because I have to mount this muskox. And so I'd hang out with him while he mounted the muskox, or a polar bear, or a wolverine, or something like that. And then, we'd finally get to work on it a little bit. So yeah, a lot of it took place, just kind of scattered out over 2 years. But then he finished it right before the World Taxidermy Championships in 2015, and took it to Springfield, Missouri for that.
And the students will probably learn once they watch the whole film, but how did it do when it was taken to the World Taxidermy?
Well, he wanted to enter it into the recreation category, because he really did it kind of scientifically, like he does the other recreations, the Irish elk and the panda, except for he didn't have like a skeleton or a body to measure, but he used the photos from the famous Patterson-Gimlin film. And, they had cast the footprints when they were on site in 1967, and you could see a picture of the foot in one of the frames, so he knew that was 15 inches, and he was able to extrapolate all the measurements. So it was all very scientific. But because the Bigfoot had never been scientifically classified, they wouldn't allow it into the recreation category. So they put it into this interpretive art category, which is kind of a new division. And I can't give too much away, but
you just have to watch it.
yeah.
We have a lot of questions coming in from Sealy. And so I'm not going to unmute them because they're there, but they've got some great questions.
Yeah.
First of all, they want to know, do you believe in Bigfoot?
I get that question a lot. And, before I met Ken, I never really thought twice about Bigfoot, but he's pretty compelling. There's a lot of evidence, but it's kind of circumstantial evidence. We don't have anything that'll really prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt that Bigfoot exists. So I kind of go back and forth. But for me, I'm more interested in just the possibility that it might exist. And I think there certainly is that possibility. And then I also kind of like the existence of Bigfoot kind of as in mythology, as a metaphor for the wilderness and as a protector of the wilderness.
And in the same camp as like the Loch Ness Monster kind of stuff.
Well, and to a lot of people, yeah.
And I'm going to turn the tables because I can see a lot of these students. I want to see thumbs up if you believe in Bigfoot, or not so much, or maybe half and half. What do you think? Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down. Oh, we got a lot of believers.
We got some thumbs up.
We got a lot of believers in the crowd. Awesome.
Well, let's get a few questions with some students on the webcam, and then we'll punt it back from the live.
I was going to go to Miss Daniel's class in Laurel, I believe. Laurel High School. Are you there? Hello?
Which camera is she?
Partly Pro after that, so probably looking at about 8:30.
Miss Daniels, you are live. Do you have a question? Does your class have a question?
And if you want, I can email you some information.
Probably not. Okay, we're gonna move on to Spring Creek School down in Decker. Let's go ahead, Spring Creek.
Is real?
Is Bigfoot
Yep.
real?
Is Bigfoot real?
That's the question. I think we don't know.
That is the question.
We've talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something you have to decide for yourself, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Let us go to, how about Miss Barry's class in Moore?
Okay, go.
Moore, are you there? Do you have questions?
Oh yeah, we got a lot of hands.
Why did you choose Ken Walker to do the documentary on?
Well, Ken's the best taxidermist in the world, and he also is a really funny guy. He used to be a professional Roy Orbison impersonator. I don't know if you guys know who Roy Orbison is, but he's a singer, a rock and roll singer. And he's just fun. He's a funny guy, and people like him. So when you watch the film, you'll get that idea. You know, he's pretty entertaining. So he made a good subject.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he looks kind of scrappy at first. You meet him
Yeah.
and you're kind of like, who is this guy? He definitely doesn't take himself too seriously.
Yeah,
which
he's
is
good
refreshing.
He's good at laughing at himself.
Yeah, that's important. Those are good qualities to have.
How about Miss Barry's class again? Do you guys have a question?
We got a lot of hands.
Yeah.
Let's
I
do
know.
blue sweatshirt.
Do you like I forgot what I was gonna say.
Okay, go ahead, Landon.
Did Ken ever give you a taxidermy piece?
Well, he gave me the Bigfoot just a couple weeks ago. So, and he said he's going to give me a Wolverine, but I won't hold my breath for that because he always has a whole bunch of things that he's supposed to do. You know, last time I talked to him, he had like 6 mountain lions he was supposed to do. So he's a busy guy.
Busy guy.
Yeah.
Sealy Lake has a question. What is the whole process of taxidermy?
Summarized.
Summarized in a sentence or less.
You know, you can get a lot of that when you watch the whole movie, but really what you do is you skin the animal. You take the skin off of the carcass. And if you're careful, you know, there's really no blood involved, you know, it's pretty clean. And then you take that skin and you have to preserve it so that the hair stays on and it turns into leather. So it's a process called tanning, and it's kind of complicated and it involves chemicals, and most people send it off to a professional tanner, but some people do it themselves. So then you take the body, the carcass, and a lot of taxidermists will buy a store-bought form. They'll take the measurements and they'll order out of a catalog the form for that animal, and then they'll put the fur and the hide back on the animal and sew it up. But people like Ken will actually carve the animal out of foam. So he'll carve the body out of foam and change the posture or the, you know, whatever position he wants it in, and then wraps the fur back around there, and then you put in glass eyes and sew it up and wash it and comb it so it looks all fluffy, and that's basically how it's done.
So when he's working with these recreated animals, is he then how does he decide to use, I mean, is he using other animal fur clearly to kind of recreate?
Yeah.
And...
So the little part you saw, he was working on a koala, and it wasn't a real koala. You know, he made the koala body out of foam, which he carved, and then, you know, used photos of koalas to get all the proportions right, and then was, you know, messing around with different furs to see what he could use, because koalas are endangered and you can't use koala fur. But he ended up using wallaby fur, and wallabies are very plentiful in Australia and New Zealand. So with the Bigfoot, with the panda, he used black bear hides, which he bleached and colored so that they looked like panda. And with the Bigfoot, he used a Highland steer, which is a long-haired cow. Because, you know, the thing that people say about Bigfoot is that they look like they have hair instead of fur. So fur is actually 2 coats of hair. It'll have an undercoat that is usually kind of fluffier and thinner, and then another overcoat that's
Like
kind
coarse.
of more coarse and sheds water and that kind of thing. And, but very few mammals have hair. Goats have hair, and it turns out Highland steers have hair. So he wasn't real happy with the length. He thought the length was a little too long. But other than that, I think it looks pretty good.
And you guys saw it when we were in. Can
We'll
you go to
save
raise
at
a
the
hand?
end again.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll exit with it. That's good.
Yeah.
Intro,
Yeah.
outro.
We have a question from Victor School. Would you call this film more of a documentary or a conjecture about Sasquatch?
Ooh, that's a
Ha.
great question.
Good question. I would call it a documentary. In fact, I'd call it a biographical documentary because it really centers on Ken Walker and kind of follows him through parts of his life. And there are some things that happen in the movie that are kind of life-changing, and you get to watch his struggles, and yeah, to me it's a biographical documentary.
Yeah, it's almost more of a portrait.
Yeah.
That's a great question, though.
Of
I was
something-
thinking that myself.
Something interesting.
Yeah. Kind of get you to question
How did-
what do we know about things and how do
Uh-huh.
you fill in the holes, almost like Swiss cheese.
How did you find him?
Well, I read, like I said, I was on that forum that had all the taxidermists on it online, and I knew about him through the forum because he's kind of I found out he was famous for these recreations, and then he was also featured in a book called Still Life: Adventures in Taxidermy. That was about taxidermy, and he was one of the characters in the book, and that's where I found out that he was a Roy Orbison impersonator, and he's just a pretty funny guy. So
He seems pretty approachable, too.
Yeah.
Like, I can imagine that getting
Yeah.
to know him was pretty easy. It looks like he's, like, open to letting people in. And
yeah, he was real
Training
open,
new
but it helped
people
that
and-
we hit it off early
Yeah.
on too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I see a question here in Miss Barry's class.
Ooh, let's go there. Okay, Moore, go for it.
Do you want to take a...
What are you gonna do with the Bigfoot that Ken gave you?
I'm not sure yet. I'm going to be touring with the film for the next 6 months or so. I've got some festivals to go to and screenings in a few different locations. And then I probably will find a museum that might want to keep her. So she'll probably be on loan to a museum somewhere.
I'm wondering if Moore wants him wants her as a mascot, maybe.
donation site?
What do you think, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does he make miniatures?
Moore, do you have any other questions for him?
What was your main inspiration for the film, and is there any other advice for anyone who wants to make a film? Any advice and are you working on any other movies like that?
Well, I'm not working on any other thing yet. The inspiration was, I've been shooting films for other people for most of my life and thought that I would be able to get a career doing that, but it wasn't really working like I thought, and I thought, maybe it's just time to make my own movie. So I actually had started working on another project that just kind of didn't get anywhere, and then decided to do the taxidermy movie. I don't know, what was the rest of that question? Did I get it all?
He said, what advice would you have? What advice would you give to somebody that was interested in filmmaking?
Don't do it. No,
Hey.
I
It's
shouldn't say that.
inspirational.
Yeah, the industry is changing a lot, and technology is changing to the point where, it's a lot easier for maybe a one-man crew, or a one-person crew, I should say, or even just a real small crew to make a feature film now. So, with all the help with things online and YouTube and all the software is getting easier to get, it's opened it up to a lot more people. So yeah, I think it's great, start with something small and manageable and do a couple short films and you'll learn a ton.
Let's ask those students out there. How many of you have made a video with your phone or another device? How many of you like making videos? Yeah, we've got a lot. Well, let's go to Spring Creek and
Whose class is lower left here?
What does it say? Mine's different than yours.
I don't see anything.
Let's see. Spring Creek, can you unmute your microphone and ask us a question? There we go. Any questions?
Nope.
What about the school with the theater screening or up on the big projector?
That's Victor.
Is that Victor? Victor,
That
do we
is
have any
Victor,
questions?
Yes. Where do you like to travel, and does that connect with your filmmaking?
Yeah, the shooting this movie took me all over North America. I was all over Canada. I was all over the Northwest and down into Florida and the East Coast. I like to travel everywhere, but if I did it again, I would pick somebody that was in a warmer climate because it is cold up there in Canada.
That's great.
We are right on the border with Canada, so we get a little taste of it.
Yeah, Ken's quite a bit up there, up northwest of Edmonton. And
yeah.
I mean, it was when he met me in Park City a month or 3 weeks ago, it had been 50 below up in Canada.
50 below, 50 below.
Yeah. I think Celsius and Fahrenheit meet at about 40 below.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's cold.
My
it's
folks
really
are from
cold.
Alaska, and it's 35 below, and I thought that was cold.
Yeah, it's cold.
It certainly gets cold here in Montana. Do we have some more questions from students?
Let me look.
We've got about 10 more minutes here for Q&A.
Well, and we're gonna, the special guest is coming again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Stay tuned.
let's see. I am combing through these. When did you start making the film? I know you said it was 7 years.
Yeah, I started in
making.
2013. And it was just little bits and pieces here and there. Ken actually sold his shop right after we started, so he was building a new one. So for about 6 months, he didn't even have a shop. So things were slow, I'd go up and we'd work on it whenever, he had time.
I know it said in the film that you can make money in taxidermy, but it's kind of hit and miss, right?
Yeah, it's hard for anybody that owns their own business like that, and sometimes it's just hard to, he'll mount something for somebody, but they're busy and they don't come to pick it up when he expects them to. So he's, got this $10,000 bear there, and he just has to wait till they can come pick it up. So it can be kind of tricky, I think. And he travels a lot, but yeah, some taxidermists do pretty well, and some really struggle. A lot of people work out of their garage or something like that until, and do it part-time, and then later become full-time. And then there are some shops that are real big and have like 10 or 15 taxidermists working in there, and I assume those guys, do pretty well.
Yeah.
We do have a question from Ronan. Hi, yay. After finishing the film, how far did you expect it to go?
Well, I really wasn't sure, and I still don't know exactly. I do have a distribution deal with a company that will be putting it online in about 6 months. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. The industry keeps changing, so it's really hard to say. It'll go to like iTunes and Amazon first, and then hopefully to a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime, and then there's another stream that's advertising oriented, that's where people can watch it for free, but it'll have ads on it. And so I'm not sure. I'm hoping. There's a lot of people out there, so.
Well, and I'm wondering too, it's so fun to share this in Montana.
Yeah.
A film like this where people are very connected to nature, and we love a good landscape, and we have, big forests and mountains, and I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to the significance, especially with how much the industry is changing. I know a lot of us have easy access to films online, so sometimes going to theater screenings seem less significant, and which is why it's so special we're able to bring these films into classrooms, because this is kind of the premiere in a lot of ways.
That's great. I love that too. It's different when you watch it on your phone or on your computer. When you see it in a theater, you know, somebody will laugh at something that's funny, and then other people will laugh too. You know, it's this thing like you may not realize it's funny, but then everybody's laughing, and it becomes a really different experience.
Yeah.
So you know, I will be showing it at some screenings, several festivals, and some special screenings around the country. But for the most part, it'll just be available online.
We have a very patient student in Victor that I think needs to ask a question.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can get their microphone to work. I'm not so sure. She or he's had their hand up. Their microphone is being really weird. There we go. Victor, do you have a question? Maybe. If we can't hear you, you might have to type.
Make sure that your microphone's unmuted.
It is. They were having technical issues with their mics on.
Oh, okay.
So type your question in the chat box, and we will get it out there in the world.
I have a question.
Okay, go Patty the Sasquatch.
Has anybody seen my Montana cousin?
Okay, students, I want to see those hands. Anybody seen the Montana cousin? What's the Montana cousin's name, Patty?
I think it's Matilda.
Matilda. Okay.
Well, we'll keep our eyes out.
Okay, kids, so you need to keep your eyes out in the forest next time you go out.
We can take a few more questions from the crew, and then we're going to sign off here. I see another question
There
over
might be
here.
a question for Patty.
That's true. Any questions for Patty?
We can tax her brain.
I see, what's that class in the corner? Is that Jody's class? No, that's not Jody's. That's...
I see it differently than you do, so it's hard for me to tell.
With that kid with their hand in the back of the class, we can't...
Oh, okay. That's Miss Barry's class.
Miss Barry's,
anymore.
that's right. Miss Barry's class wants to ask
Go
a
for it.
question.
What did you like most about the film, and what would you change about the film if you could go and redo it?
Question.
Ooh, great question.
You know, I really like the parts where he's actually making the Sasquatch. I think that's really cool. So, you know, he's carving it out of foam, and there are these huge chunks, and watching him, you know, assemble the whole thing and trying to get the proportions right was pretty cool. And I also love the glass eyeballs. So part of the film, I go to the factory where they make the eyeballs, and then I really love the part where he gets the eyeballs and puts them in, because it really changes the Bigfoot once it has the eyeballs in there. What would I change? I don't know. That's tough. You know, I don't know.
Is there something you would like to explore more of, or something you didn't quite have access to that you wish you did, or?
Gosh, I don't know.
Maybe
I don't
it's the
think
perfect
so.
film.
It's not perfect, but you know, it worked out. I was pretty happy with the way it came out.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a question for Patty. So I'm going to unmute you, Patty. Hang on.
Yes?
Okay, Patty. Ronan High School wants to know how you stay groomed.
Well, have you ever seen a bear scratch its back on a tree? I use
Yeah.
a similar technique for brushing my fur. I'm very hygienic.
Thank you, Patty. Oh my goodness. We have from Seeley. What was Ken's best piece of work?
You know, Ken's work is all really good. He's really good at wolves. He's done a lot of bears. I think some of his best things are the mustelids, the pine martens and weasels and wolverines.
Cool. And from Victor, what was the actual process of filming like?
You know, it's really fun. I did almost all of it myself, and I love that part of it. You know, the post-production gets kind of tedious and takes a lot of time, and it's expensive, but I really love doing production. You know, I do the sound, and I run the camera, and you got to kind of have two eyes open and really be on your toes so you don't miss anything. And of course, you're going to miss some things. But yeah, I really like doing the production. To me, it's really exciting.
I'm wondering if a student wants to share. I know we saw a few hands of young filmmakers are interested in the field. If you're working on anything right now, what is it? And if you're not, is there a film you might want to make a documentary film about to explore a question or a person or an event? Maybe just get a raise of hands and we can get one of you to share would be lovely. Anybody?
Looking. We haven't heard from Spring Creek for a while. Let's see if they have any
There's some
film
hands.
ideas.
Oh yeah, maybe Victor's got some hands up.
Oh,
Do they want to
Victor.
share?
They are talking in the chat box, but let's see if we can unmute them. Okay, Victor, you're unmuted. If you can talk, that's the one that has the funky microphone. Or type it in. Type your ideas.
Yeah, feel free to type it in and we'll share it here.
Films.
So take a minute to do that, and then we'll take one more question.
I have a question for Patty. So I'm wondering if Patty could turn the tables and mute her. Just a minute. Okay, Patty, there you go. Whoops, sorry. Patty, if you could turn the tables and make a documentary film, what would you make a documentary film about?
I think I'd make one about driving. I don't understand why humans are always moving around so fast in those cars.
Okay, well, maybe we'll see that at the festival next year. Who knows?
The first Bigfoot directed film. I'll be there. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I know there's a lot more hands up and questions. We just unfortunately have to wrap things up. So if you do have more questions and want Dan to answer them, I'm sure he'd be willing to. If you pass those along to your teacher can pass them along to us, and then we can pass them along to Dan. A little bit of a telephone game here, but
that would be great.
yeah, we'll be in touch. And thank you guys so much for joining us. We've done this for a few years now, bringing in these special virtual screenings with and during the film festival with these premieres. So it's really exciting, and it's an honor for us to be welcome in your class and to hear your lovely questions.
And thanks, Patty.
And thank you, Patty, for taking the time to answer our questions. Dan, are there any closing remarks you'd like to say? Or
No, I hope
anything
you guys
wanna
get
add?
to watch the whole film. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, please do. And another thing I'd like to ask of you is just write down a few things you learned from the film and a question you still have. Because I think a lot of times these new kind of topics kind of turn the wheel a little bit, make us kind of shift our perspective in a way.
We have a lot of topics from kids now. Dogs, horses, cops and robbers, and scary sci-fi.
Oh, wow.
So with
All
that
right.
thought,
We've got some cinephiles out there.
go for it.
Good.
Well, thank you so much. And if you are near Missoula and want to drive down for the festival, it is running through Sunday, February 23rd, and we'd love to see you here. We have a lot more films in store, and I think Big Fur is screening once more.
Yeah, on Friday at 2:30.
On Friday at 2:30. So very exciting if you want to come see it in the big theater. We've got it here. Thanks again, you guys. And just a quick note on our education programs. We do offer a slate of youth programs that I run here at the Institute. We have a youth fellowship that runs throughout the school year. We do a teen doc intensive where high school students can join us and make a film in 2 days. We do a Native Filmmaker Initiative film club in the fall. So teachers, put it on your calendar. We'll be starting up again in October, and you'll be getting emails from us in August about joining us for that. We curate a selection of short Native and Indigenous documentaries made by Native and Indigenous filmmakers and talk a little bit about that with OPI's Mike Jetty. So we've got a lot of cool things that we do here. This is just one of them, but we're really honored to be able to bring people in and share it with you. So thank you guys for taking the time and for your great questions, and we will see you next time.